Have you ever wondered why you might vividly remember having your shirt on inside out during a fifth grade presentation, but may not have accurately recalled winning your first club soccer trophy? Could the traumatic experience actually help you recall information better? This study, Imagery Retrieval, may explain why recall of negative scenes contains more accurate detail, by Chris R. Bruin and Christy M. R. Langley, relates imagery and retrieval and correlates how negative scenes might be more accurately recalled. This study connects the encoding of information to memory and the subsequent retrieval of this information using imagery. Encoding is defined as acquiring information and transferring it into memory. This study then asks what we are better at encoding, negative or positive images. Visual imagery is defined as seeing in the absence of a visual stimulus. Furthermore, the study tries to explore what extent this imagery is used when trying to recall details. Also, it asks if imagery retrieval is greater with negative images. This article makes a possible explanation and says that because negative scenes require more processing at encoding, this means that they have more repetition of processing at retrieval. This journal interested me because it showed how imagery is very important in retrieving information. I'm a visual learner, so if I better understand how imagery works, maybe I'll be able to recall information better. It also interested me because it made me wonder if I actually remember negative moments better in my life. It's always easier for me to tell an embarrassing story than tell how I won some prize or did something very good. Lastly, intrigued me because it was a potential field for post-traumatic stress disorder patients. This experiment contained two parts, the scene and the cue. The scene was scored based off of a valence rating from 1 to 9. 1 was very unpleasant and 9 was very pleasant. The cue was then created for each scene and was something found in each scene. The cue was either visual or verbal. For example, as shown in figure 1 below, the red parrot was either visualized or the words "a red parrot" were shown on the screen. A mixed amount of positive and negative scenes were shown to each of the participants. In addition, visual and verbal cues were also produced in mixed amounts. The scene was set up for 10 seconds. Then, a black screen was shown for 0.5 seconds, followed by a distraction task administered to the participants. Later, randomly ordered visual or verbal cues were presented for 10 seconds. The participants were required to describe as many details from the corresponding scene as well as report how vivid the cue brought the scene to mind from 1 to 4. 1 was no imagery, and 4 was that the image was as clear as day. Finally, diaries were given to the patients for 7 days to record if they had spontaneous memories or images of the stimuli presented in the experiment. What did the authors predict? They predicted that negative images were more vivid than positive images. They also predicted that visual cues brought about more vivid imagery than verbal cues. They also said that visual cues were remembered more than verbal cues, and lastly that negative images were more spontaneously coming to mind than positive images. Results from Table 1 show many different findings. First, Table 1 shows that negative images were found to be more vivid than positive images. This is shown in the third column labeled Mean Vividness. Negative images for both visual and verbal cues were higher than that of positive images. Second, Table 1 shows that visual cues were not any more vivid than verbal cues, as shown in column 3. Their vividness was around the same number. Table 1 also shows that visual cues produced more correct images. In column 4, labeled Number of Correct Images, there is a higher number of correct for both positive and negative visual cues. This table also showed that scenes were better recalled if the scene was negative and visual. It also showed that imagery in fact occurred because of the vividness results. Results from Table 2 show that negative scenes were more accurately recalled than positive scenes. It also showed that with a visual cue, there was better recall for negative scenes. Finally, the third column showed no advantage in accuracy without the use of an image, as shown by the accuracies of both conditions being very similar at about 1. Finally, Table 3 shows the results of the memory diary during the 7-day period. These results show that there were more memories of the negative scenes with visual cues during testing. Overall findings in this experiment showed that negative scenes were more vivid than positive scenes. It also showed that negative scenes and visual cues had fewer incorrect images. Negative scenes were also recalled more accurately than positive scenes, especially when used with a visual cue. Lastly, it showed that later involuntary memories occurred more often when the scene was negative and had a visual cue. Critiques of this journal could be that there are differences depending on the scene as to what can be reported. Some scenes have less detail, which could affect the recall of information. Also, they didn't use verbal scenes, which could also have effect and alter results. Finally, there were no neutral images, which means they could not explore their effects on imagery. Applications of this experiment could be found in functional neuroimaging techniques to explore brain regions involved in encoding and retrieval. If we explore more into these areas, we can further explore how memory and imagery go hand in hand. Also, there are applications in post-traumatic stress disorder patients. If we can help these people reduce their imagery of these traumatic events, we can in turn help stop their vivid flashbacks from being as detrimental. So next time you watch a scary movie, you have your encoding and retrieval processes to thank. This is my works cited page, and thank you for listening to my presentation. Peace out.